Hello everyone, welcome to another Voice Essentials Live Hangout. It is so good to have you joining us. If you're watching the replay of this, it's good to have you hanging out with us as well. Of course, many of you watch this as a live replay, so it's always good to have you join us. And though you're not watching it live, you can always leave your comments in the comment section below, and join in that way. To those of you who are watching live, and there's quite a few of you in the chat section already, hi everyone. It's good to see you all, and to have you joining in today's live hangout. We have got a super special guest for you, and we always do, don't we? We always have some great guests here on the show, but today's guest is someone who I have known of for many years. Her work, this book here called The Dynamics of the Singing Voice, the 5th edition, released back in 2009. It featured quite prominently in my dissertation work, and I used quotes from Dr Meribeth Dayme quite a bit throughout quite extensively throughout my dissertation. And so it is actually a real honour for me to have her on the show. And we'll be meeting her in just a moment. Before we do, just a quick catch up on where things are with Voice Essentials 2. Many of you already own Voice Essentials 1, which you can see being advertised at the bottom of the screen down here. If you don't, make sure you download a copy and get using those exercises. But for those of you who do, I'm really hoping everyone, in about 3 weeks, 3 weeks is getting close, we will be releasing Voice Essentials 2, another whole activity exercise CD of another 17 exercises that are task-specific to the contemporary voice. And I know you're going to get a lot of value out of them. It's good to see, hey, it's good to see Karen. Just saw Karen come back into the live chat. It's good to see Karen from Singwise joining us. Hey Karen, good to see you, and also thank you to Linda, who is one of our moderators also, who will be taking your questions. I'm getting sidetracked here, but just for those, we may well get to question and answer at the end of the show, so make sure you start leaving your questions. Linda's going to collate those, and we'll look at those later in the show. That aside, Voice Essentials 2, we had the last recording day Saturday and a couple of days ago. And so it's just got to be mixed, mastered, and the website prepared so you can download it. I will keep you up to date for when it goes live, and so make sure you don't miss out on that. It is sounding awesome. Okay. Many of you last week suggested that a Facebook group would be a thing you would like to do. I mentioned that I was thinking about doing a Facebook group, a Voice Essentials Facebook group, a place where we can interact a little bit more readily, and we can all have more discussion and not just wait for these live hangouts, but that we can, converse in an encouraging and supportive manner, but do it more readily, because we want to be able to do it more than once a week, and so I think we're going to do it, everyone. I haven't quite finished setting it all up, but hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe next week I'll be able to let you all know and give you the link to jump in and start interacting and engaging, and I'm hoping that it'll be a really productive space for all of us. So there's some news. I'm really excited, a little bit nervous about interviewing our guest today, because this lady has so much experience. She really is, what do we call, she's a statesperson of our industry in the world of singing teaching, and it is just such an honour, not only for myself but for us as a community, to have her join us. Without any further ado, let's get into the rest of the show so I can introduce you to Dr Meribeth Dayme. We'll do that right in a moment.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Hello, nice to have you join us.
What a pleasure to be here.
It is so good to have you on the show, and thank you for staying up on your Sunday evening and because it's 9 p.m. on the west coast of the US, which is where you are currently.
Yes.
So thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. If I fall asleep before 10, you'll just have to ring a bell or something.
I'll somehow try to get a message through to you. Wake up! I don't think we will. I think I'm looking forward to a really engaging discussion. So I think it'll be fabulous. And I'll just make sure everyone, make sure our levels are right. You guys know that we have the tech challenges of doing what we do with this show are very high. So I want to make sure that we don't spoil it with me not getting the levels right. Okay, let's. Meribeth, I wonder if we can jump into today's show. Maybe just by asking you a bit about yourself and about your pedagogical journey, and because as I said at the top of the show, you've been doing this a little while, and certainly a lot longer than myself, and you've seen a lot of things and heard a lot of things. I wonder if you could share with us a bit about your journey just to get started.
Wow. How many hours do we have?
Less than one now.
Okay. I think, one of the interesting things about my journey, and it has been long, most of you know my age, but it's not young. And the journey still continues. That's the fun of it. And I remember I used to have students who would come in and they would plop a piece of music down on the piano and say, after 3 weeks, I want to finish this today. And I'd think, oh God, I've never finished that song. I've been singing it for 20 years, So in a way, that's kind of the way my journey is. It's just never ending. And you don't ever, to me, I don't ever get a handle on all the information because there's so much new to see. But it started like everybody else. Certainly at the time I was in school, you went to school, there weren't any musical theater degrees or anything like that. So it was all classical training. And in the US at that time, there were associated with, say, voice, private, a bachelor in voice performance, there was always a pedagogy course involved as well. And so we took pedagogy, and it was quite normal. It's interesting to find out around the rest of the world that it was not. So I took the standard pedagogy course, but I also had a huge curiosity about the voice. So I spent a huge time in the library reading every pedagogy book that I could put my hands on. And so that gave me an interesting background. So that's where it started. But my passion for the voice started from the time I was 3 years old, I think. I never stopped singing. It wasn't songs, it was just singing. And so that was me. And then I went on to get a master's degree in church music and theology, and with a major in voice in New York. So I got to enjoy all the wonderful things that go on in New York. And at that time, the student standing room at Carnegie Hall was like 50 cents. So, that tells you how far in the dark ages it was. And I sort of cut my teeth at a lovely small women's college, teaching all the voice, music theory, which I had nearly failed in college, so that was really interesting, and music history, which I had about 1 year of, and directed the community chorus, and just did everything. And then I went to get my doctorate at USC. We had studied William Bernard's book, Singing the Mechanism and the Technique, and I wanted to go and work with him because it's sort of natural. So I then went to USC to get my doctorate. And along the way, Bernard came in very early on and said to me one day, sit down, I have something to tell you. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to boot me out, and I've only been here a week. And he knew of my interest in anatomy and how the voice worked, and I've always been incredibly curious about how things happen. What happens if? And so he said, I've gotten you into the dental school anatomy course.
Wow.
And that was a big shock because I had not had any science since high school. So it was like, oh, okay, fine. And it was fascinating. There were 120 dentists, and there were 2 women. One was a speech therapist, and the other one was me. So
Wow.
30 cadavers, 120 dental students. So you can imagine what that was like. And then they asked me to be a teaching assistant in the course the next year, partly because he said to me, I know you won't BS anybody. And it wasn't that I had done wonderfully well on the course, but that's what happened. So I ended up teaching anatomy starting then and then for about 20 years with lots of cadavers. I taught in hospitals, and everywhere I taught, I went into the clinics because I wanted to know how they used it. The medical model of anatomy tends to be memorizing things and not always function. It's like, get me through the test. And so I had a ball. I really did. I had the greatest time. And I was teaching singing and anatomy then, which everybody considered really strange, until I'd say, well, you know, your body is the instrument, so why not know a little more about it? But it was certainly Bernard's idea and dream that some of the mythology around voice be opened up for exploration, because there were so many things in the books. And one of the most wonderful things that happened in the anatomy department was I would take in a pedagogy book, and the head of anatomy, named Bob Gregg, who's no longer with us, would say, let's think about it. How does this work? Let's make sense of it. And it was just the most wonderful experience exploring that way. And then I went on, I finished my doctorate with much urging from my friends, and then took a university job at the University of Delaware, where I taught both singing and anatomy. I taught anatomy to the physical therapist and full-time music in the music department. And then after a number of years, I won an NIH postdoc to study and do research on the voice at the Royal College of Surgeons in London, England. And that again was an adventure. But what happened was it gave me an opportunity to start to look at a lot of other things. And I got involved in some of the alternative healing and many other aspects of things that were non-medical, and began a whole new exploration and journey. And after 2 years, I decided that I had sort of stole my soul to the devil in the university, and so I went back to honor my sabbatical and resigned my tenured position and left for England full time.
Wow.
And ended up there teaching. Sorry?
Might I brave the question, and feel free to deflect if you want to. What decade is this all happening in?
I won an NIH grant in 1979.
Wow.
Okay, that was the 80s, basically.
Yeah.
And
allow me just to stress too, because many people watching the show wouldn't know who Vernard is. William Vernard is regarded as one of the 20th century's greatest voice scientists. How would you describe him, Meribeth? Because you knew him. How would you describe the importance of Vernard's work?
I think he was a voice scientist, and he also was a meticulous researcher, really, really meticulous, and so curious and wanting to be able to get that information out. And of course, he was at one point president of NATS and the National Teachers of Singing, and he did a lot to promote the teaching of voice, but the understanding of the voice, because again, we had a lot of old textbooks that had sort of, I guess the best way to describe it was to say that singing teachers were making the anatomy fit their singing techniques.
I think that still happens, Meribeth.
I think so, but less. They get called on it because too many people know about anatomy now.
That's true.
And so that sort of started that journey. But when I went back to England, I got quite involved. I was teaching partly the Central School of Speech and Drama. I taught their speech therapist, and then later their master's program in voice. And I was teaching anatomy to the dancers at the Royal Academy of Dancing and taking like 16 hours of dance myself. And so I was having a ball after 20 years of university life, all of a sudden exploring the huge world that I had felt that I'd been missing when I was teaching. So that was part of that journey. So I explored all kinds of healing modalities with hands, without hands, and then finally got involved in energy healing with the mind, and the implications of that, and the whole world of what that was happening in quantum physics and quantum mechanics was explosive. And I realized that while our traditions had produced a lot of great singers and some not so great, that we were missing an awful lot in what we were learning about how not only the voice, but the whole human being worked. And that a lot of our techniques were blocking energy in singers. And then we were telling them that it was hard. And of course it's hard. If you're blocking your energy, it becomes really difficult to sing. So that's sort of a potted history of my journey. And now, of course, I'm very interested in how the energy of the human body works and how important it is, and how important our thoughts are.
And I want to talk about that with you today, because I know it's such a strong feature of your work. Before we get into it, I just want to again bring people's attention to this book, because it's such a fabulous text, and it's currently in its 5th edition. Now, everyone, I've put an affiliate link in the description section below if you want to grab a copy. So this is the 5th edition, Meribeth. When did you write the 1st edition? When was it first published?
It was commissioned while I was at the Royal College of Surgeons. So,
wow.
And it was published in 1982. So it's a very old book.
it is, but yet it's similar to Vennard's. I've got Vennard's book sitting on my shelf, and it's a text that I will still visit and go to, and still has some currency to it. And the 5th edition of this came out in 2009. So this is by no means an ancient text. What do you think, in that period of time, having written the 1st edition in 82, to coming now to the 5th edition, and now here we are, nearly 10 years on from this release, what do you think have been the major paradigm shifts in vocal pedagogy that in turn affect the voice essential people in the voice essentials community, singers, people who are wanting to develop their voices? What do you feel are the main things that have changed?
I think the first thing is that people jumped on the anatomy bandwagon, and partly because of the academic world, because it was another way to show academic credentials, is to have that intellectual background.
Yeah.
And I have some mixed feelings about that. I think the anatomy is wonderful, and obviously I can't say that it's not, because I'm embedded with it, in terms of my background. It's been a living thing for me for many years. But I think it's easy to get caught up in that and not how to use it. I think that's where the biggest problem lies in learning anatomy. Is they may be able to name my sternocleidomastoid muscle, but they won't tell me how to unstiffen my neck, or they won't be able to create an exercise which moves that muscle and then keeps me from stiffening my neck. And it's the creativity and the ingenuity are still needed with the knowledge, which will give us the how to work with singers. And so it's I think that's beginning to change, because The rest of the world has been involved in huge areas of self-development over the last 30 years, really, if not longer. The voice world is just beginning to, not just, but in terms of the numbers, are just beginning to go to these courses themselves. And as that happens, then from the self-development world, this is creeping in to the way they teach singing.
Yes.
Which I think is really great. I think we've been influenced hugely by the media, because there's so many programs on singing, which isn't all bad. I know a lot of teachers go, oh my God, what they're doing on these programs. But in all honesty, singing teacher studios are full because everybody wants to learn to sing. And it's partly because of that. So we have to honor what the media has given to us, even if we don't like what they're producing or what they're doing with their singers or whatever. I think it's been a boon for the singing community, and certainly the teachers of singing community. And also, our influence is worldwide now. We hear singers from all over the world. You don't just hear Western classical music. You hear African, you hear, Belgian, you hear all kinds of indigenous, everything. So our ears are being modified by an amazing variety of sound that's happening.
I wonder if I might. So that's I guess in part your reflection on what you've observed of the world of pedagogy and the world of voice teaching. I wonder if you might be so kind as to reflect that back on yourself. How have you changed in yourself and your teaching, and how that outworks itself into your studio over the past 40 or 50 years?
Well, anything that I've learned has been transferred to my students. And one of the things I always say is I'm not afraid to experiment, and it is an experiment. And if you hear something and you want to try something, you can just say to the student, what would happen if we did it this way? Like, this is an experiment. And there are a lot of people who feel a need to follow an exact kind of program or method or system, and they're good, but it's like you can explore with your own knowledge and what's happening, because if something works for you, then sure, you're going to want to try it on the student. So and if it works, that's a bonus. If it doesn't, you haven't lost anything.
Yeah. And so do you find that exploration opens up new paths for your students as you go down those tributaries?
Sure, and the reason that I've taken my path is ideally to make the path of others easier. And in all honesty, my preferred student is really a coworker. I prefer teaching teachers of singing.
Yeah, right.
Because I can get to more students through teachers than I can one-on-one students. And certainly now, I'm much more likely to work with a teacher of singing than a singer per se, unless they're pretty high up on the professional how
I think that speaks to, how I introduced you at the beginning of the show. You are and rightly so, by virtue of your multiplicity of experiences and expertise and all of those sorts of things, quite rightly teaching that level of at that level, I guess. I'm saying it poorly, but hopefully I'm making my point. So something that we talk about a lot here on the Voice Essentials channel, I tend to use the term metaphysical a bit in my studio and here on the channel to relate to those and to indicate that voice is more, you're more than a larynx, that you are, that you bring your history, you bring more than your biology to to a microphone and to performance. You bring the very essence of you and your experiences and your person. And I know that this is an area that's very dear to you. I wonder if you could maybe tell us a bit more about your own, the idea of bringing energy to what we do, and bringing ourselves to what we do.
I guess at our most basic, if you ask a physicist who is dealing in quantum mechanics to describe a human body, they would say it's a dense cloud of particles. It's just that we're used to looking at something that we perceive as solid. And when you look at it as a cloud of particles, you have a very different kind of availability to you than just something dense and hard and physical. And I think what happens is we've been looking at the physical so much that we don't see beyond it. So people who are looking at tongues or larynxes or a left shoulder or something else don't realize that everything affects all the other things. I mean, this is true of muscular balance as well. If I turn my head to the side, I feel it all the way down to the base of my spine. So it's not just my head that's working. And I think teachers forget that. They want to work on the particular, and that may not be the problem. That may just be the symptom. And when you're working with the energy field, there are several things that are important. One is the words you use and the thoughts you have actually affect your energy, and that's testable. Anybody who's done kinesiology or even had their vitamins tested using muscle testing, things like that we actually can test for what weakens a human being, what weakens their energy field or what makes it strong. And my little test is to test somebody and say, think of the thing you love most, and then you get the strongest arm you've ever seen. And then think of something you detest, and you get a weak arm. You move that into music and say, think of that high note, and their arm goes weak. No wonder they can't sing it. And so we have multiple things, and also the language that we use. I'll never get that right. Your brain takes that into consideration, and the huge research being done on neuroplasticity and how the brain is able to change its pathways, not just little things. It can change its pathways with the change in thinking, and there's no age limit. And I'm saying thank God for that. So there are multiple things going on here relating to that, but certainly language is important.
How do you... Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you if you...
You interrupt.
No,
Yeah.
I was going to ask, how do you in your studio, because I suspect, having read your book, I suspect you're not a person that throws the baby out with the bathwater. You still take advantage of your very deep knowledge of biology and anatomy and functional understandings. How do you bring those together so that they're harmonious in the studio, so that you get more bang for your buck, which is an Australian colloquialism? How do you go about doing that?
First of all, they're not separate. They're part of the same system. And the energy system starts before the physical. The physical is the last place that something shows up. Mm-hmm. It's somewhere in your metaphysical space, to use the word you use, but it's further than that. Mm-hmm. So it starts with how you think, what you believe, all kinds of things like that. Your cultural patterns, you name it, they all go into the mix. On the other hand, you have to take a student where they're at. Now, as I said, I don't take many private students in my studio anymore. But if you've got somebody who's a left brain nerd and they're not going to listen to you unless you speak their language, it's like when I was living in France. I had to learn to speak French because they didn't want to try to speak English. So they were happy to deal with my bad French. But basically, when a student walks in the door, you're going to have to start it there where they are. And one of the interesting things that happens in a lot of studios is that people are starting with lectures on anatomy. And my response to that is, as a tennis player, I never saw a tennis coach ever explain the anatomy of the muscles of the arm to a tennis player before they gave him a tennis racket. And I never heard him explain those muscles ever to a tennis player. So we tend to we've gotten caught up kind of in an academic thing and needing to justify. And to me, and your students just want to start to work. They want to sing. They want to sing better. So what can you do that's simple that will get them doing that rather than starting with some justification of why you're teaching? So that's a sort of rambly answer to your question.
It's not rambly at all. I'm wondering how we might then express that to some of our audience that are watching, right now. I wonder how we might take that and encourage someone that's maybe not working in a studio, they're working in a satellite situation by themselves and perhaps in front of a mirror or their own practice space. What are some things that we can do as singers that activate that awareness?
Okay, I think, yeah, so we're now talking purely about singers, not teaching singing, but
true enough.
Can sing again.
Yeah.
First of all, they can play with sound. As children, we play with sound all the time. And we use some of this in singing studios like lip trills and raspberries and all this kind of stuff. And that's baby things, but it's part of the development of your mouth and your lips and your tongue. So playing with sound is very, very beneficial. And the second thing I would say is actually improvising, because we think we have to sing a song. And when people say to me, I can't sing, and I'll say, compared to whom?
Yes.
Okay. Because they're looking at all the people they've seen on TV or in movies or in some way like that, and not the fact that they are internally a singer anyway. Everything about the person vibrates. And singing is nothing but vibration. So you're just tying into your own vibration. So I say play with sound. And if you're a great shower singer, that's great too. And improvisation is so much fun. One of the things that classical singers missed out on because they're so busy trying to get it right is really learning to improvise. And I think it's a wonderful way to start singing, even if you're, having, what did you have for breakfast today? I had blueberries on my porridge. You can make up stuff and just have fun. And that fun word is really, that F word is the word that we need in singing, is fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's have fun with it. I can honestly say, and my kids, I've got 3 children, they get sung at a lot. Now they just think it's dad being daggy dad, but I think it's a wonderful thing to sing speak, and play around with it and I might well be daggy, but I think it's a wonderful thing to use the instrument beyond simply, if you've got mic in hand or your feet are on a stage, to embrace the holistic nature of this thing we call voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you take one of the things you take away when you approach it that way is the rights and wrongs of it, which make people tense. And that's the quickest way to stress the energy field and get a negative response.
Yeah.
Both of those words, right and wrong, do that to the energy field. And so it's really, really important to me that play aspect. And the younger we do it, obviously the better. Because adults have been so screened in getting it right that they have trouble playing in case they might get the play wrong.
Yeah. This is resonating so strongly with a couple of my recent what are called pit stops. For those of you who don't know, I do a Friday video every Friday. It's called the Vocal Pit Stop. It's always less than 2 minutes. And the last couple that we've done, I've been encouraging people, stop thinking too much about your singing. Just sing. Enjoy it. You know, it's not about it being right or wrong. The moment it is the moment you won't measure up. You know, this sense of I have a little saying in my studio where there is no room for perfectionism in art.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, God doesn't do art.
no. Yeah, absolutely. And yet, in creation, we see so much perfection.
Yes.
Don't we? It's when we release ourselves, abandon ourselves, I guess, to the play that you're talking about. That is perfect. I love listening to little kids sing. Why? It's not because it's accurate, but because it's wonderfully raw and human and all the things that we as fellow humans resonate with. So once we're playing, Meribeth, what would be the next step for a singer?
I take the play into learning a song, learning the music. For instance, if you're learning music to something, you because people tend to want to learn the words and the music and the rhythm, everything all at once, which is not a good way.
Yeah.
And it works with the left brain, but it doesn't work with the rest of your body. But for instance, putting the music or the melody on and just moving to it before you ever even start to do anything. Get it in your body, feel it. And I don't mean tapping or clapping, I mean actually physically moving your body to that music and allowing it to be part of you and not caring. You haven't learned the melody yet. You haven't learned the rhythm yet. It's okay. So it's a very useful thing to do. And I don't particularly advise listening to a singer and imitating them at all, but just getting that music in your bones so that it's coming from a different place. When it comes to text, there are 1,000 things you can do with text. It is so much fun to play with text. And you play with it in silly ways, in mime, in drawing, in moving, I had somebody rapping their aria from the Verdi Requiem one day.
That would have been a fun lesson.
And you know what? When he sang it afterwards, it was in a master class, and when he sang it afterwards, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Because he had given up his idea of how it ought to be done, and we had put so many things in the middle that it made it easier for him to get away from this measured text. Not that he was wrong with rhythms and things, but all of a sudden the text had a life of its own, the music had a life of its own, and the two got married.
It sounds to me like what you've done is you've connected him with the essence of the piece.
Yep.
And it's getting to that essence, isn't it? To that very again, it's not something you can, it's not tangible. And I think that's where people struggle, isn't it? It's not something you can put your hand on.
No.
You know, or your larynx on. It's something you have to imbibe.
Yes.
For the want of a better term.
And you do that by playing with the text, with the sounds of the text, putting them out of context of the rhythm and the music.
Yes.
Using it as almost a dramatic dialogue of some kind. But it's more than just a dramatic dialogue. It's a process of doing that. And by the time you finish, people know the text, and they know it in a wonderful way with all the phrasing.
I often direct my students to look up online a performance by Dame. Dame Judy Dench, and she did Bring in the Clowns, Send in the Clowns. Now, she by no means was the best. She was not the best voice on that stage. By no, and a person of less character would have felt entirely intimidated by the voices around her. But when that woman sang, wow. And everyone, if you haven't watched it, you've got to go look it up. Send in.
Yeah, and it's amazing.
It's amazing.
Her recitation of Shakespearean sonnets, if you want to hear color in speech.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful and brilliant. And
because she's getting to the essence, isn't she? She's getting to she's allowing the narrative to come to life. And she just becomes an embodiment of that. And her craft is just amazing. I do want to just, I'm looking at the time going, oh, I wish I had so much more time, but everyone, I'm sorry, I've got a student coming in about 20 minutes. Meribeth, on the thumbnail of today's video, and in our emails, we back and forth, and I ended up putting on the thumbnail the organic voice. And it came out of some of the email discussion you and I had. And I've got a question mark next to it. What is the organic voice to you?
I don't know. The first time I saw it that you'd put that up was tonight. So organic.
I've put you on the spot.
Well, organic, means you're growing your vegetables in pure soil that don't have any pesticides and things like that. So I would say probably it means the pure voice, but it comes from the pure person.
Yes.
And it's a grounded, earthed, sincere sound that is that person's own sound, not an imitation, not a mimic, and that they are truly themselves. And in all honesty, when people are like that, that music is so compelling. I can't tell you. People are just magnetized by what that person's doing. And they don't even have to be the best singer. Yeah. They just need to be fully in themselves, giving their spirit to that sound.
It rolls off the tongue, doesn't it, to be vulnerable in performance, and yet it's one of the hardest things to learn to do. I think because we even struggle with vulnerability in relationships, and we're not performing.
Just in being single, you do too. It doesn't matter. Vulnerability is, and I think people mistake vulnerability for being weak.
Yeah. And
it's not that. It's really, and most singers know the moment they walk out on stage to do a solo recital, you're naked.
Yeah.
Basically.
You are. Yes.
You are naked out there unless you are just really completely happy in yourself and that you're in your body and you're giving with your passion and your love and you're sharing that. You're not sharing whether that note's going to be right or whether you got that song or anything like that. But if that's in your head, that's what you're sharing. Yeah. So whatever's in your head, wherever you're pointed at in terms of your singing, that's what you're sharing with your audience, because on either a conscious or a subconscious level, they're getting.
Yeah.
You know what I would love? I'd love to look at a couple of questions that people are asking. Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, well, we've got one question, so I'll just fire it off to you now. And this comes from Matt. Matt's one of our regulars here, and he's a bass voice, and I happen to know that about Matt. And he asks this question: you know how bass singers say their low notes come from their basement or way down in their belly? Where does a bass singer's notes really come from?
They come from the same place everybody else's notes come from. It's just that body, that vocal tract, and that mind are built to resonate in the bass register best. It doesn't mean they can't sing other notes, but that's where their money notes are. Yeah. And that's where the quality of their voice lies. Yes. So they're going to get that resonance, whereas, say, a baritone is not going to have the same resonance. He's not got the same structure in here. So, and it has to do with the vocal folds. That's more of it's partly a physical issue, but it's also concepts too. And because I know that if you look around a choir, it's very funny. Look at the bass section, they're all going. they're jamming their heads down, trying to sound bass. You look at the tenors, they're trying to sound tenor. You look at the altos, we're from alto, and the sopranos, they're trying to sing like this. You don't even need to hear them. You just look across
Look
the
at what
choir.
they're doing.
Yeah.
We've got a question here from Turquoise Skies. What's the difference between harmony and melody? So these are questions all off a bit off topic, but they're good questions. How would you
melody is just a simple melodic
It
line.
is, yes.
That's if you're singing the tune all by yourself, that's a melody. Okay? The harmony, depending on whether it's with singers or whether it's with accompaniment, are structures underneath that support the melody and fill it out. That's the best I can give you. If you're listening to a barbershop quartet, then you're listening to harmonies not only that are very close and very, very modulated and need very fine tuning, but they are all there so that you can lose the melody in that, but basically the melody is a single line.
Yeah, and I've got a video, Turquoise, on the channel that you can go and check out. It's basically a Harmony 101 video where we go into structure of harmony and those sorts of things very briefly. And if you want to check out, in fact, on Saturday night, my kids, my wife and I had a movie night, and between two movies, because my youngest had to go to bed because she's not old enough to watch the second movie, I was showing my children, many of you here on the channel would be aware of a group called Pentatonics, and they're kind of the modern day example of some really classy harmony. I was showing my students a great group called, not my students, my children, my son in particular, a great group called New York Voices. And they are fabulous. And then I went and showed him another group who inspired New York Voices, which is Manhattan Transfer. You want to go and check them out. And then I was also showing them another group here in Australia called Idea of North. Go and check those three groups out. If you want to hear some fabulous harmony, it all comes down to the arrangement, as I was telling my son. It's all the great thing about harmony is not just the singers, it's the arrangement and getting beautiful arrangements together. So there you go. Well, I think we probably need to call it a day. I'm seeing the time, and I'm very conscious also of your time, Mary Beth, and being as late as it is. It has been so wonderful to have you here on the show, and I honestly, in fact, I don't think I've ever said this, but I feel warm after being online with you. You know, I feel a warmth, and it's been so lovely to have you on the show, and I'm sure everyone who's watched today has felt that same sense of warmth and care that you bring to your space. So thank you for bringing it into our space. And
could I just say that the work that I'm doing now is in my online courses. I have several online courses that are one for teachers, one for singers, and one for speakers. And the most current work I'm doing is not in books. It's in those.
It's
those
online.
Courses.
Yes, and thank you for just before we finish up, bring my attention to that, because in fact that is written under your name right there. www.choresinging.org is where people can go to find all of that information. Is that right?
They can find it there, or they can go to meribethdayme.com and find them.
Excellent. Well. And that link is in the description section, everyone. Below. So thank you very much for spending the time with us today. It has really been wonderful, so thank you.
That's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Wasn't that wonderful? It's wisdom has gravitas, doesn't it? And experience has gravitas, something that you can just go, this person really knows their stuff, and I'm sure you felt it like I did as we were talking with Mary Beth. I hope that perhaps in the future we can get Dr. Dayme back to talk with us again, because I think there's so much more depth that we could plumb with her, and that I just know there's so much more she could share with us. Thank you for joining us. If this is the first time you've ever joined us here at the Voice Essentials Live Hangout, welcome. I hope you've enjoyed the show today. We do this every Monday, Australian Eastern Standard Time at 2 p.m. So wherever you are in the world right now, make sure you have a look at a clock, because about 50 minutes ago is when we start every Monday. So it may well be Sunday in your part of the world. I hope you have a great week. Hit the thumbs up button if you've enjoyed today's live hangout. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the white bell icon so that you don't miss a single notification for not just the live video, but also the pre-record videos that go to air every Wednesday and every Friday, the vocal pit stops. I hope to see you again soon. My name's Dr. Dan. Sing well.